All right, we're ready to go. Well, welcome everybody to the 2024 District
Yay,
33
thank
Rules
you.
Clinic. If we can ask you all to please mute your microphone for the presentation. There will be question and answer period. We'll explain that later. I want to introduce myself. I'm John Peretta. I am part of the District 33 umpire staff. The staff is responsible for training and development of umpires within our district. We also help with scheduling All-Stars, TOC, and we also help with some of the scheduling some of the in-season tournaments as well. We are not an association, so we don't have umpires to staff your games. Sometimes we can by request, but most of us on staff are already umpiring games. Some of us on the staff are already UICs of their local leagues. But again, our primary focus is training and development, and also maybe some conflict resolution if you ever have if your leagues ever have ejections or problems with rules or questions about mechanics or anything like that. All of our contact information of all the staff members is on the District 33 website, so feel free to reach out to us anytime. Our UIC, I was the UIC last year, but our new UIC is John Evans. He's not here tonight, so I'm pinch hitting for him. And we do have who's here tonight, Dave? We have Dave Graham, who's also on staff, Ken Saxer, and any other staff members here? I don't see them. You see any, Dave?
I don't, but I've got this thing full screen.
Oh,
So
Robinair Ruiz, he's also here. He's on staff. So some of you might recognize us from being the District 33 on the District 33 umpire staff. So tonight we'll start with our rules clinic. We've got 2 nights. Each night covers a different part of the rule book. We're not going to go into every single part of the rules, but we're going to highlight a lot of the things that we think you need to know as both an umpire and also as managers as well. So hopefully we have some managers and coaches as well tuning in tonight. Okay, so our next thing, I'm going to do a shameless plug right here for our mechanics clinic. This is another thing that the umpire staff is responsible for. This is our big training program, and that's going to be at San Carlos Little League this Sunday. Hopefully, it's not going to rain. If it does rain, it's going to be pushed back another week. But it's registration starts at 8:30 a.m. We get started at 9 o'clock sharp. It's about a 4-hour clinic. You'll get kind of the basics, some plate mechanics and some base mechanics training as well too. So it's a good clinic, and we hope to see you there. We'd really like, if you can, if there's UICs here tonight, to make sure you get as many people as you like to come out. It's open to all ages. Anybody that wants to umpire, in all experience levels as well too, from the novice to the seasoned. It's always good to get started knocking off that rust and get back in the swing of things. So hopefully we can see you there. You don't have to dress like an umpire, but we want you to bring a glove, a mask, and an indicator if you have it. If not, no big deal. You don't have to sign up for it. Just please show up. If you do, if you're going to bring a few people, it's not a bad idea to drop John Evans a line via email. Again, his contact info is on the District 33 website. So we hope to see you there as well.
John, I'm just going to
Next
talk a
slide.
little bit about the
You
conventions
go
and
ahead.
how to do Q&A. So you'll see
Okay.
these little stars that include some additional commentary that we thought it was important to add. There are like rule interpretations or rules of thumb or things that you might see on the field but may not necessarily be in the rule book. We have these red badges for significant updates. There really aren't any significant updates this year. I didn't remove any of the badges from these slides that we used for last year, so you'll still see significant updates for 2023. So, if you skipped a year of the rule book, then maybe they're still significant for you. And then we're going to paraphrase and pull out excerpts of rules because we only have so much screen real estate to work with. So we're going to probably give you the most important synopsis of the rules, not necessarily every single word that's in there. If you have any questions during the presentation, please just post it in chat. We're not going to be monitoring chat until we get to a logical break in the slideshow. So when we're talking about the batter, we go through a bunch of slides on the batter, and then we'll pause on a Q&A slide and we'll look back at chat, and we'll just field any question that's posted in there. All right, rulebook format, John, take it away.
So the rule book is broken into official regulations, and then those are under Roman numeral rules. So you'll see regulation 4 or 3 or 2 or whatever. And then the next section is the official playing rules, 1 through 9. Those 1 through 9 is the most that we're going to reference, and the most as an umpire you're going to reference as well too. Most of the baseball playing rules that you see are kind of generic across all codes, but Little League does have quite a few specific ones as well too that we'll try to highlight. And then in the back, the tournament rules and guidelines, those are for tournament. Those are for the what we would call all-stars. It's not for TOC. So those can be different as well too, but those are not for your regular season. Your regular season will be in the official playing rules, sections 1 through 9. And we'll cover the all-stars later in the all-star rules. We will have a specific all-star managers and umpires meeting as well too. So that'll be later on in the season. But there is no, what I want to say is there is no substitute for diving into the rule book. You can still go onto the website, littleleague.org. You can still get a paper rule book, one that I like to use. I know.
I thought those were dinosaurs.
Shocking, but you can still get it. This is from 2023. And actually, if you have one from 2023, it's also good for this year. There's really not a whole lot of, like Dave had mentioned before, there's not a whole lot of significant updates as well. But anyway, it's right here. You can get it. I don't know if the 2024 is out yet, and they're not very expensive. They ship out, I believe, Williamsport, so you can pick those up. If you're a league UIC, you might want to pick up a few and hand them out to your umpires as well too, and your board should have no problem picking up the tab for that as well too. You can also go to the umpire registry. It is at the Little League website, littleleague.org, and if you register for as an umpire in the umpire registry, you can also get the rule book as on the app, downloadable app, and that is free, so it's kind of handy to have as well too for you youngsters that want to carry it on your phone. So, but us dinosaurs, we like the paper version. Okay, moving on. Let's talk about Rule 1, objectives of the game. Okay, so Little League, it's real simple. The bat rules are real simple now. Non-wood bats must have the USA bat logo on it. It's real simple. It's got to have that stamp. You'll see it at all levels. The BB Core logo, that's for seniors. A couple of items, the traditional batting donut is not permissible. And this has been a rule that we've seen for a very long time, and we still see the batting donuts occasionally. So, but you can't have that. Little League doesn't allow it. And also, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago, Little League got rid of pine tar. So they don't want any sticky stuff on their bats, apparently. So who knows? And then any action, one thing I want to point out, any action with a damaged bat is legal. There is a difference between a damaged bat and an illegal bat. So you have to know the difference between that. We'll talk about illegal bats later on in the presentation. Next slide. So again, there's really, the only thing that's really restrictive on the bat regulations in Little League is the length of it. So T-ball through majors, the maximum length is 33 inches. Again, those have to have the USA baseball mark. And intermediate and juniors, that's the bigger diamonds, the max length is 34 inches, and those can be USA baseball or can be BB Core. And BB Core is more of a high school bat, but they'll allow us to use it in intermediate and juniors. And seniors, max length is 36 inches, and it has to have a BB Core label. And that is for non-wood bats. Wood bats don't have to have anything on them. Wood bats do not have to have grip tape. They don't have to be stamped with USA Baseball. They don't have to be stamped with BB core either. So wood bats is pretty much legal as long as they meet the diameter, max diameter, and the maximum length requirements of Little League. And non-wood bats must have a grip of tape cork for a minimum of 10 inches. If you see me sometime somewhere, perhaps over an adult beverage, to tell you a very funny story about the 10 inches on the grip tape and what happened in a game one time. So yes, Dave knows that one. Okay. um, Also for seniors, it's got to be a drop 3. So that means it's the length, the weight is no more than 3 less than the length. So if it's a 33-inch bat, it has to weigh 30 ounces, and 36 bat has to be 33. So, but the BB core bats come that way anyway. You don't really need to know about it. But again, look for the USA baseball mark on non-wood bats. Next slide. Definitions. So these are definitions of terms. We always try to tell people to umpires, when you are talking to a manager or coaches or trying to explain something, try to use rule book terminology. And there are some things that are different. Sometimes you'll hear a lot of people talk about interference when it's really obstruction. So you need to know these. This is a good starting point to really get the definitions down, some of the particulars in the rule book for Little League Baseball. So an at-bat, this comes into play for mandatory play. So an at-bat is when batter assumes position in the batter's box and no count, completes that time at bat by being retired, scores, or the inning or game ends. So this is kind of important for mandatory play that may come into, as an umpire, that may come into account. As a coach or manager, it certainly does come into account as well too. So you got to make sure that your kids are getting mandatory play. So you need to know what the conditions are of an at-bat according to Little League Baseball.
All right, John, I forget where am I starting?
You're starting at slide 39.
Okay. You'll let me know.
Yeah. I will let you know. I'll hang you out to dry. Okay. Let's talk about the base path. This is very misunderstood. People talk about the base path. So this is a little bit sometimes misunderstood when a play is being made on the runner. So this talks about a runner's out when running more than 3 feet away from his or her base path to avoid being tagged. So when there's a play on, basically when there's a play on the runner, the fielder has to have the ball and being and attempting a tag attempt. So they can only deviate 3 feet away. So since we don't really carry tape measures or yardsticks on the field, it's really basically about a step and a reach. You're going to have to use your good judgment to determine how far 3 feet is. And so you need to know that. Now, the base path is established when the tag attempt occurs and is a straight line from the runner to the base to which she is attempting to reach. Now, the base path, the runner can make his own base path. As long as there's not a play being made on the runner, they can run in circles. They can run wherever they choose to. So sometimes that's a little bit confusing about where the runner has to run. The runner can run anywhere they want to, pretty much, as long as there's not a play being made on the runner. This rule comes into play when there's a tag attempt on the runner. Next slide.
Hey, John, before we advance, the one thing that I want to add is that we are in section 2, which is definitions, and you'll notice that this slide is out of order because it's rule 708A1. And that's because base path is not defined in the definitions section, but it's something that we all really need to know. And so we intentionally put it in here. It didn't just wind up being out of order.
That's a good point. We do skip around a little bit because the rule book, Little League's rule book is a holdover from the old official league baseball's rule book. So as things were added, they got a little scattered. Major League Baseball a few years ago cleaned this up and changed a lot of the numbers. So a lot of the numbers won't match up if you go to refer them to what we call official baseball rules. So they did clean it up to get a more logical path. But in our case, we still have kind of the old format. So things are kind of stuck in other areas. So we will skip around sometimes. So very good point, Dave. Thank you.
Hey, John, I've got a question for you. Is
Yes.
the base path the same as a baseline?
So no, the base path is not the same as the baseline. So that's what causes a lot of confusion. The baseline is really basically the line, the straight line drawn between the base paths, or excuse me, between the bags. The base path is what the runner established. So you'll see so there is a difference between that, between the baseline and the base path. So the baseline is basically an arbitrary line. You could use the foul lines, but it's a straight line between the bags. Really doesn't have much meaning to us as umpires unless you have a fair or foul decision. But the base path is defined by the runner, and you'll see the runners. Those that are coaches, you'll see the runners. They'll take a wide turn towards first. They don't necessarily. In other words, they don't necessarily have to run an exact straight line between the bases. Okay, let's talk about a bunt. A bunt is a batted ball not swung at, but intentionally met with the bat and tapped slowly. One of the points of emphasis on this is it differs, and sometimes people get confused with the softball rule of holding the bat in the strike zone. But holding the bat in the strike zone is not an attempted bunt in baseball, in Little League baseball. You can hold the bat in the strike zone if you make an offer at it, and this is the beauty about the rule book. The umpire gets to decide: do you think that the batter tried to make an attempt to strike the ball? But this is the one thing that causes confusion as well too. They can hold the bat in the strike zone, and if that ball is thrown by the pitcher and is a ball determined by you, it is not a strike. It's not an automatic strike. That differs from Little League softball, where holding the bat in the strike zone throughout the entirety of the pitch would be called a strike. The catch. So there's a difference between, we're going to talk about this too, the difference between a catch and a tag. This is the act of a fielder in getting secure possession of the hand or glove of a ball in flight, basically a batted ball in flight, and firmly holding it before it touches the ground. So we need a few things to declare it a catch. So we're going to need a voluntary and intentional release after the catch. And also the fielder must maintain their control of their momentum while maintaining a possession. So in other words, if the fielder catches it, takes a few steps, falls down, and the ball comes out of their glove, that is not considered a catch because they weren't in control on their momentum. So you need voluntary and intentional release. You need to make sure that the fielder maintains control throughout the entirety of the catch until their momentum stops or whatnot. So that's the definition of a catch, and it differs slightly from a tag attempt. But this is basically a ball in flight, and it is a batted ball. So what's not a catch? As I was saying, go back.
Oh, my bad.
Go back, Dave. What is not a catch?
I'm trying to imagine where you're at in your thought process.
I know.
I'm just going to wait for you to tell me to advance it.
So what is not a catch? Possession lost prior to demonstrating control. So that as I mentioned, the example I gave, someone that catches it maybe runs into the fence and the ball pops loose. If their momentum was still taking him into the fence, that's not considered a catch. And it deflects off an offensive player, not a defensive player. You have to realize that the difference there, if it deflects off an offensive player, umpire, or fence prior to gaining control, the ball is no longer considered in flight. It can defect off a defensive player and then be caught by another defensive player, and that's still considered in flight. But if it's an offensive player, umpire, or fence prior to gaining control, it's no longer considered in flight, and it is not a catch. Okay.
Is it going? It's not.
So we need to know, as umpires, we need to know the distinctions between a fair ball and a foul ball. Okay. And people think that's real simple, but sometimes it's not and causes a little bit of confusion. So a fair ball is a batted ball that settles on fair ground between home base and first base, or between home and third base, or that is on or over fair territory when bounding to the outfield past first or third base, or that touches the base, second or third base. Notice first, second, or third base, or that falls on fair territory on or beyond first base or third base. and over fair Terry touches the person of an umpire player, or while over fair Terry passes out of the playing field in flight. So that would be the last sentence there. That would be a home run. It passes out of the field. So basically a fair ball is one that settles on fair ground between home and first base. So between home and first base or third base, a batted ball that touches the ground and then is settled on the foul line or inside the foul line, that's going to be a fair ball. Also, if it's touched in fair territory, that's going to be a fair ball between first and home or first and third. So once it goes past the bag, that's a little different story. If it's in flight, past the bag, it has to first land in fair territory. So there's a distinction between settling and landing and touched. So you need to know those distinctions before that. So an interesting play here is if a ball is hit and has a little bit of English on it, or actually third wheel starts serpentining, and I've seen it before, that it hits in foul territory, it rolls across the line into fair, goes back out to foul, and then comes back into fair territory and is settled or touched by a fielder. That's a fair ball. So just because it hit in foul territory before the bag, before first or third, doesn't mean that it's automatically a foul ball. So it can go in and out of fair and foul territory before the bag. Past the bag is a little bit different. So if it touches the base, any one of the bases, doesn't matter, even the side of third or the side of first base, any ball that touches any one of the bases, it's automatically a fair ball. And one thing to note, on a fair ball, a fair fly ball, it's where the ball is touched. Okay. It's not like football where you can make a catch with your feet in bounds. So a fielder could have his feet in foul territory and make a catch where the ball is in fair territory, and that's a fair ball. The converse is true of that as well, too. So it only matters that the foul line is like a pane of glass that goes all the way up. So it only matters where the position of the ball is, not relative to where the fielder is, if that ball is going to land or be caught in fair or foul territory. So you need to know the distinction of what is a foul ball. I hope I confused everybody with that explanation.
Hey, I think we can confuse them a little bit more. Can we talk a little bit more about bounding balls?
Yes. You want me to talk a little bit more about bounding balls?
Yeah.
Okay. So a fair ball, we've determined that a fair ball before the bag. So you're talking about one that bounds past the bag, Dave?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So let's talk about we're talking about a ground ball. When we say bounding, we mean it's bouncing, okay, not in flight. So it's bouncing, so it hits the ground. So if you have a ball that's hit, let's say down the third base line, when that ball bounds over the bag, if the ball is within the plane of each side of the bag, it doesn't matter where it lands past the bag. So you can actually have a bounding ball, a ground ball that is hit, bounces over third base, so it's directly over third base, and that is in fair territory. And then as its momentum goes, the first bounce past the bag lands in foul territory. That is by definition a fair ball. So that only matters, it matters if it crosses over the bag. Conversely, a foul ball, as soon as the foul ball bounds past the bag in foul territory, that's a foul ball. That ball can never be fair. But a ball can bound in fair territory past the bag and then touch foul territory and still be a fair ball. Is that what you're alluding to, Dave?
Yeah, well done.
Thank you. All right, next slide.
And I'm trying to advance it. Did I go 2 or 1? Yes. No, that worked. Okay, go ahead.
Good on a force play? Okay. So this also causes a little bit of confusion about what is a force play. A force play is a play in which a runner legally loses the right to occupy a base by reason of the batter becoming a runner. So when we talk about a force play, it's when the batter runner becomes a runner, all other runners are sometimes forced to go to their next bag. So if you have R1 runner on first, batter runner puts the ball in play in fair territory, that runner on R1 must vacate the bag. He has to. He is forced to go to the next bag. So there's a lot of variations of that where the runner is not forced to go to the bag. So you have to realize this, that when the base, let me back up a little bit. So you can only have a force play. You only have a force play when the batter becomes a runner. There's no other force plays. Often we hear about an appeal play where it was a force play where the batter left early, and then on a caught fly ball, and there's an appeal play. So that often is referred to as a force play, trying to get that runner going back to the bag because he left early on a caught fly ball. That is not a force play. That's an appeal play. So the only thing that comes into play is when the batter puts the ball in play. If there are runners, if they're forced to move to the next bag, that's what we consider a force play. So there is a little bit of confusion on managers and coaches sometimes of what constitutes a force play. It is not a force play anytime when the batter runner, for instance, flies out. So if the ball is caught, batter runner's out, then the force is off. And there's often times where you can remove the force on a play inadvertently. So as an umpire, sometimes that happens to us where R1 and maybe there's a ground ball to the first baseman and he'll step on the bag. So once he steps on the bag on first base, he's retired the batter runner. And to try to get the runner that was on first advancing to second base, it must be a tag play now instead of a force play. So you need to know that. And also the thing is, no runs can score when the third out is a force play. Okay. So let's talk about foul tips. There's a difference between a foul tip and a foul ball. So you need to know the distinction between that. A foul tip is a batted ball that goes sharp and direct from the bat to the catcher's hands and is legally caught. So it's sharp and direct, has to touch the catcher's hands, either the glove or the hand, and then is legally caught. So it either goes directly to the catcher's mitt or sometimes it'll bounce off the catcher's body. If it does that, it has to hit the catcher's hands or gloves first. If it's sharp and direct to the bat, doesn't hit the catcher's hands or glove first, hits his chest protector, then that becomes a foul ball. If the catcher drops it, that becomes a foul ball. So let's go sharp and direct to the catcher's glove or hand. Now it can go sharp and direct to the glove's hand, to catcher's glove or hand first, ricochet off his body, and then he can gain possession of it. That is a foul tip. By definition, it is. So also, any foul tip that is caught is a strike. It is a live ball. That's why you need to know the distinction between a foul tip and a foul ball. And we also teach in our mechanics clinic coming up this Sunday about how to keep your eye on that ball as well too, to maintain the status of the ball so you know whether that ball is a foul tip or a foul ball. On a foul ball, runners can't advance. On a foul tip, runners can. The ball is alive in play. And you'd be surprised how many people don't know, especially a lot of managers and coaches don't realize that a foul tip is live. It's a live ball. Okay.
Hey, John, is this the same in other rule sets that people might be familiar with?
So no, in professional baseball and official baseball rules, they changed that. It doesn't have to go sharp and direct to the hands or the bat or the hands or the glove anymore. It's just sharp and direct, and it is caught however the catcher catches it. That's going to be a foul tip. So they did change that in official baseball rules, but has not come down to Little League yet. So we still have kind of the old school. So you may see that sometimes, but know that this is kind of, in Little League Baseball, this is one of those where, and I believe Major League Baseball is the only one that has changed it like that. I believe high school and college is the same way, same with Little League Baseball. Okay, an illegal bat. You're going to sometimes see this as an umpire and managers and coaches. You're going to be responsible for illegal bats as well, too. So everybody needs to know what a legal bat is. The legal bat has been altered. Okay. So it doesn't, it either has been shaved or rolled. It it's not doesn't have the USA sticker on it. The barrel diameter is maybe 2 3/4. We don't see it as much now because of the bat standardization. So it's real simple. If you see the USA or the BB Core sticker on it, then it's a legal bat, depending on which division you're playing in. So there is a penalty for that. So I'll let you guys look that one up. I won't let the cat out of the bag. I do want to say that the penalty is much different in All Stars. So those of you that are going to be doing All Stars, you need to know the difference in the penalty. The penalty is very severe in All Stars. And also managers and coaches, you need to know that as well too. You don't want to get caught with an illegal bat in All Stars because it's a very severe penalty. So and again, it all falls on the manager, regardless that the umpires have checked your gear. If there's an illegal bat found, the responsibility is ultimately on the manager. Now, again, there's a difference between a damaged bat and an illegal bat. So a damaged bat is just one that's broken, that's cracked or whatever, has too many dents in it. Those are not considered an illegal bat. But an illegal bat is basically if you're, for instance, if you were using a BB Core bat in majors, that's an illegal bat. If you're using a bat that did not have the USA baseball sticker or the BB Core labeling on it, those would be considered a legal bat, and you would be subject to the penalty of 606D. Okay, next slide. Okay, in flight. This is a ball in flight. So a batted, thrown, or pitched ball which has not yet touched the ground or some other object than a fielder is considered in flight. So you can't have deflections. We talked about that earlier. You can have deflections from off a defensive player. And the ball is pretty much always live in any of these situations. So that's the definition of in flight, and that comes into play. A lot of you may have remembered or seen the clip of Jose Canseco trying to catch that fly ball. It bounces off the top of his head and goes over the wall. That is, in fact, was correctly ruled a home run because it was off of a defensive player, not an offensive player. So you need to know that, what the definition of in flight is. That's pretty much a fly ball.
Hey, John, when
Next
you come
slide.
up with some trick questions like that, let's put it to the audience and let's cover them during Q&A.
Okay, will do. Okay, an infield fly. This comes up quite often, and believe it or not, an infield fly is the rule in minors as well. Okay, so a lot of times we see that, and for those of you that may be umpiring minors, yes, an infield fly still comes into play. I don't believe it comes into play in T-ball, but I don't quote me on that, but I don't believe it does. But an infield fly is a fair fly, but you have to have a distinction between it's a fair fly ball, not including a line drive or an attempted bunt. You cannot have a bunt as an infield fly, and which can be caught by an infielder with ordinary effort when first and second or first, second, and third bases are occupied with less than 2 out. Okay, so that's the situation that you need to know. So first and second or bases loaded, less than 2 out, you could have an infield fly situation. So let's talk about that. Basically, the rule that you need to know is, could that fly have been caught by an infielder with ordinary effort? So what this means is that any fielder can catch that, okay? So yes, outfielders can in fact catch balls that are considered infield flies, because it doesn't say that it must be caught by an infielder with less than 2 outs. Could it have been caught by an infielder with ordinary effort? Now, ordinary effort is going to change depending on the level of that you're doing. So at the minors level, ordinary effort is not, they're not moving a whole lot. So more than likely, in the minors division, the infield fly, they're pretty much going to have to be camped under it or real close to them. So as you get up in ranks, as majors, they have a little more athletic ability, and so they can move a little bit more. But that's what you as an umpire have to decide. Was that a fly ball? First of all, was it a fly ball, not a line drive or a bunt? But you have to decide, was that a fly ball? And could that fly have been caught with ordinary effort? So in the majors level, it's a little bit you know, a little more broad in the sense of what ordinary efforts is. And as you get up to the levels, like intermediate and junior, ordinary effort is going to be a different standard. So you need to kind of decide, was that ordinary effort on the infield fly? Basically, the infield fly is there too, so the defense can't get a cheap double play. That's why that rule exists right there. So with 2 outs, there's no infield fly. But that's the thing that you have to remember. Could it have been caught with ordinary effort by an infielder? So if an infielder could have caught it and an outfielder is playing shallow and he catches it, that still can be an infield fly. And the runners can advance at their own peril. And you do have to consider variables, like I said, division and weather also. And this is one of those correctable things too. Sometimes the umpires mess up and don't declare it an infield fly. There is a specific mechanic for that, but it's still up to the defense to know, the defense and offense to the teams to know what an infield fly is as well. So even though an umpire may or may not call it, they still can declare an infield fly after the fact. This is one of those rules that you can go back and kind of change. Okay, next slide.
John, I'm going to show a video probably at the beginning of the session tomorrow. I think I showed this last year, and our friend Mike Winters pointed this out on a Major League Baseball game that he was umpiring when they had 6 umpires on the field, and the ball was hit sky high. It was probably a division game. It was an important game. The ball was hit sky high, went out to left center. I mean, that's how high it was hit. The shortstop settled underneath it, and then for some reason, he got spooked, either because the umpire called infield fly or somebody waved him off, and he moved at the last second and the ball dropped right next to him. So they called an infield fly, and the fans came unglued and threw trash all over the field. You remember that one?
I do. That would be a good one to show. Before you can move to the slide, though, a couple things I want to talk about is on an infield fly, basically what happens is the batter is out. Okay, the batter's out no matter what, whether the ball is caught or not. So if the batter is out, that also means what? Going back to the force rule, the force is off now. So the runners are not forced to advance. They can advance at their own peril. If the ball is dropped, they do not have to tag. They do not have to retouch. If the ball is caught, they're still subject to retouch and retouch appeals if they fail to do so properly. So just kind of remember that as an umpire, if you have to sort out kind of a sticky situation, the batter's out. Now, there are times where you can have an infield fly where there's some interference as well, too. It can get a little sticky, but those are kind of more advanced, and maybe that'll happen to you, and you'll figure out what to do on the field. Okay, next slide. So a play or an attempted play is a legitimate effort by a defensive player who has possession of the ball to retire a runner. So basically for a play, I need a ball and a runner. So we got to attempt to tag a runner as a play, field running towards the base with the ball to force or tag a runner, a blocker and a legal pitch. Those are all plays. And these are going to come into account sometimes when there's an appeal play, that sometimes if there has been a play, then the defense cannot appeal. So we'll talk about that, about appeal plays a little bit later as well. So what's not a play, a fake or a feint throw. Also, what's not a play is an appeal. So if the pitcher is going to make an appeal that the runner left early or whatnot, or missed a base or something like that, that does not constitute a play. So you do need to know the definition of a play.
And John, I just wanted to point out, I highlighted the word interpreted because a play, oddly enough, is not defined in the rule book.
Yes, that's true. So again, umpires get to decide exactly what the play is. Okay, strike zone. Boy, this gets a lot of questions a lot of times about what the Little League strike zone is. So we'll talk about it a little bit more at the mechanics clinic. We can kind of define it a little bit. It's a little bit easier there. But this is the subject of many debates, not just in Little League baseball, but all throughout baseball and softball. So Little League defines the strike zone as that space over home plate, which is between the batter's armpits and the top of the knees when the batter assumes a natural stance. So you have to decide what the natural stance is. Um, so the usual stance is pretty much how a batter's going to swing at a pitch. So I can tell you that this is not, if you're going to call this strike zone in intermediate or juniors, even at the majors level, you're probably going to get a little bit of flack for that. So it's not really realistic. The batter's armpits is a little bit high. So we've kind of umpires over the year, the strike zone's evolved a little bit. In minors, if the catcher catches the pitch, it's pretty much a strike. So I'm just kidding about that. But in minors, you have a little bit more leeway. The pitch doesn't come in as fast, it's kind of lobbing it in there. You want the kids to participate. So the strike zone, this would be a good minor strike zone. I would argue that maybe it could be even a little bit bigger, maybe just slightly below the knees. So de facto, we kind of go as umpires, we kind of go pretty much below the elbows, letters and below, maybe just below the knees as well too. That's kind of a good strike zone there. It's also, they talk about the strike zone. The rule book strike zone says it's right over the plate. We don't teach that, and pretty much nobody else teaches that. Remember, the major league standard for what a strike zone is not what we use. We're not professionals. The players aren't professionals. So it's a little bit different. So yes, we do teach our umpires to call some of the pitches off. So an outside pitch, you should get a couple balls outside the zone there, just off the plate. On an inside pitch, inside, maybe one ball. So we talk about a little bit. It's a lot of people define the strike zone as should be kind of egg shaped, whereas the higher the pitch should be a little narrower, more over the plate. So more down the middle, you can get away with a little bit higher pitch. As the pitch gets a little bit lower, kind of the sweet spot, thighs around the knees, you can get a little bit wider on that as well too. But this is what the definition of the strike zone is according to Little League Baseball. Not really realistic, but again, like I said, our strike zone's kind of evolved over the years. And the strike zone is the same whether it's over the plate. It doesn't matter where the batter stands. Okay. And so this is kind of an illustration of that. Again, it's probably a little bit high for majors and below. As an umpire, I can tell you, you might be getting a little bit of flack if you're calling that pitch that high. But just below the arms is that's a good zone right there. Just below the arms and just below the knees. So and I can tell you the major league zone there, it's tighter than what it is on the diagram there. They generally don't go that high, and when they do, you'll hear the grumbling about it. So it's more of like really the belt, just slightly above it. Sometimes they can get it. It seems like in the past few years they've been trying to raise that zone up a little bit, but you'll see some of the newer umpires try to grab a little bit more of the higher strike, but the old school guys, they just don't seem to. But that is the strike zone as defined by Little League Baseball. Okay, next slide. Okay, this is tag. This is different from a catch. So remember I said it was different. There's a distinction between a tag and a catch. So a tag is, excuse me, the action of a fielder while touching a base with the body, while holding the ball securely in the hand or glove, or touching a runner with the ball or with a hand or glove holding the ball. Okay, so basically on a tag, you need to secure possession on the tag. So that's when you're making a play on the runner on the tag. So you need to secure possession. You don't need voluntary and intentional release. So that's the distinction between a catch and a tag. You need to secure the ball throughout the entirety of the tag. You must maintain secure possession, but a voluntary release after is not required on a tag play. Next slide. All right, we got some questions. Dave, what do we got in our little chat there? Oh, Dave, you're muted.
Yeah, my dog was barking. Okay, so before I get to the questions, I have a question on the last slide.
Yes.
So we talked about the differences between a ball caught in flight versus a tag, but what about a throw to first base to retire a batter runner? Secure possession through the catch. Do we have to have voluntary release on that?
No, because that's considered a throw to first base is considered a tag play. Okay. And one of the other things to add about that is on that throw to first base, notice the fielder, the first baseman would have his foot, either foot on the bag, right? Catching the ball, and that's considered an out at first base, right? So could the fielder, the first baseman, catch the ball, maybe be off the bag, but touch the bag with his other hand that doesn't have the ball in it? I got ball in glove, but I touched the bag with my hand. Is that still considered a valid play?
Yeah.
Yes, it is. So there's no distinction between the foot and the hand or any other part of the body for that matter, including equipment worn properly. It could be the bill of the cap as well too. You actually touch the base with the bill of the cap, holding the ball in hand, because that's equipment that is worn properly on them. So that's even though this is one of those things, let's talk about this. It's a very good question, Dave, because a lot of people consider the play at first as a force play, right? You've heard that many times. So it's a force play at first because they throw, he doesn't have to tag the runner, right? So, but by definition, the play at first is not a force play. It's really kind of it's a distinction without a difference because it's really kind of the same, but it's not. But in strict terms of the definition, it is a tag play. That's what we consider a tag play.
All right. So the very first message in chat is actually a comment that I'll read from Jeff Staggs. He says the hard copy rule books are abridged. In other words, they don't contain all the rules and you need the digital version of the app. I have never heard that. So that's an interesting comment to me. I wonder
I have never heard
specifically
that
what's
either.
not incled. Jeff,
You have
if
your
you
rule
have
book
it,
handy, Jen? Read the front cover. I think it says right on the front cover.
but does it say what's not in there?
Well, it says
Yeah, I think-
abridged operating policies. Because
Okay.
the Little League used to come out with a separate operations manual. So I don't know that I don't know that it's different from the app. I believe the app is the same as in the rule book because it says abridged operating policies.
Yeah, so as long as it's in the plain rules should all be there. I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I've never heard of that. I'm not saying it's not, but I've never heard of that.
All right. So Stephen had a question. I think we may have covered it in a follow-up on a different slide, but he says, what happens if there was no bat check prior to the game and a batter is using a non-USA bat and a coach calls it after a hit? Does the hit count?
No. Remember, it's the responsibility, the ultimate responsibility falls on the manager. So if it was missed or there was no bat check, which happens, I mean, it happens particularly with some leagues that use association paid umpires. They typically don't do any equipment checks because it's fun. What interestingly enough is nobody else does equipment checks. Nobody else does safety. It's very specific to Little League. I'm not aware of any other organization, Pony, Babe Ruth, high school, college. I'm not aware of any of that they do equipment checks. Little League Baseball is kind of the only one. So, but it's not it's not a guarantee. It's not going to happen every game. So, and also sometimes the bats they don't get put out. We only check as umpires, we only check what's given to us, what's put out. We don't go inside the dugout. We never encourage that. So as an umpire, don't go in the dugout. Don't ask for anything. Just say, is this all your equipment here? So sometimes little Billy may have come in a little bit late and didn't put his bat out and had a travel ball bat. You just don't see it as much anymore because USA The USA logo is kind of the standard now, and that's pretty much all the bats that are being sold will have the USA. But occasionally we'll see it. We'll see an old bat. Someone's had, an old bat in the closet or something like that, or a hand-me-down or whatever, bought it at Swap Meet or Retro Sports or something. You'll see it. But there are penalties for using a legal bat, and that would still come into play there.
I would also note that there are a few models of USA bats that have since been deemed illegal. So they have failed some sort of follow-on testing after a period of time of use. The bat no longer performs within the parameters. So it used to be, what was the old bat standard that we had that was just horrible? We had pages of.
It was BPF.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was unbelievable. Yeah. So, but we still do have a few models that we really need to make sure it's not just the USA Bat logo. That's 100% a guarantee.
Yeah, that's a good point, because some of the USA bats, they get decertified. So you can find those. The best place to go is not necessarily our website, our district website, but the best place to go is littleleague.org. They'll have the most updated information on that. So that's a good point.
So Jeff asks, so why not grip tape, or so not grip tape required for wood bat? Why not? Why isn't grip tape required for wood bat?
Because the rule book says so. I honestly, I don't know. But it's just not a requirement, never has been. You can have it if you want to, but I don't know why it's not.
So I'm just guessing that the wood fibers provide a little bit more grip compared to an aluminum tube.
I would think that's the rationale behind it, but I honestly really don't know.
All right. And Jeff, again, he asks, so if a ball bounces off the first player's glove and then it's caught by a second player in the air, it's not an out?
So let me see. Let me read that one. So ball bounces off. Let me move this down a little bit. So hold on. I'm trying to okay, so ball bounces off first player's glove, or it could be the first player person by second player in the air. It is not an out. It is an out. It is an out. Remember, you can have a deflected ball off a defensive player. You can't have a deflected ball off an offensive player. So in other words, if a line drive hits the second baseman and ricochets up in the air, and the first baseman or the shortstop catches it, that's going to be considered a ball in flight, so it can be caught for an out based on the definition of the rule book. But if a line drive hits R1, maybe running from first to second, then that ball is not considered in flight. So remember, the distinction is it has to hit off, in order to still be in flight, it has to hit off a defensive player. So once it does that, as long as it doesn't hit the ground or some other object, it can be caught for an out. Similarly, if it hits the umpire as well too, it cannot be caught for an out. So once it hits the umpire, by definition, it's no longer in flight.
So I'll take this one. Jeff asks, must a base runner tag up on a foul tip? Now, a foul tip, remember, is a live ball and it's a strike. So base runners aren't required to tag up. The ball has not been hit, so they can do whatever they want.
Yes, there's a distinction between a foul tip and a caught foul ball. So a caught foul ball is considered in flight, so the base runners must tag up, but not on a foul tip. So basically, a foul tip is really, in actuality, just a swing and a miss, basically. You can treat it as such, that if it's a swing and a miss, there's really no other distinction on that. On a swing and a miss, if the catcher catches it, the base runners can leave. They're not subject to that. But there is a distinction on a caught foul ball.
And then Steven asks, if a foul tip is not caught by a catcher, is the ball live?
No. So if a foul tip is not caught by the catcher, what does it become? an ordinary foul ball. That's it. So no runners can advance. They go back to their last legally occupied base. And it's a foul ball. Strike is added to the count if it's less than 2 strikes. If not, it's treated as any other ordinary foul ball.
So Jeff had a comment. I'm a big fan of the tongue tag, and I'm guessing that's a joke. I must confess, I don't know what a tongue tag is. Educate me.
Well, I would imagine if someone stuck their tongue out and tagged the runner of the base, it would.
That's right. You're in possession of the ball. You can tag them with your tongue.
You can.
Has it
Yes,
happened?
you
Freak them
can.
out.
I don't believe I've ever seen that, but
All right. So
That's-
is an empty glove tag of a base runner an out? And then there's another question, a follow-up question to that. Ball held in non-glove hand, but tag applied with glove.
okay. So let's take the first one. Is an empty glove tag of a base runner an out? So in other words, I'm assuming in this case the ball is in the throwing hand, and then the tag is made with the glove without a ball. If you are tagging the runner, then that is not considered a tag. You must tag with the ball in the glove, in the hand, or the glove. One or the other, or both. Okay. The distinction is at first base. At first base, you could have the ball in your throwing hand and touch the base with the glove, and that's legal. You can do that, and you would get an out that way. Okay, so that's I think that answers the second question as well. So yeah, ball
Not
hand
just
and
first-
non-glove
not
hand, but
just
tag
first
applied with
base,
glove.
you
So
can-
that happens a
you can
lot of
apply to any
times
base.
too, and it's tripped umpires up, myself included, when you don't see that, when you see the tag and you think a tag has been made, but it's actually an empty glove tag. So when you're tagging the actual runner, you have to tag them with the ball, either the hand or the ball in the hand, tagging him with the hand, or the ball in the glove, tagging him with the ball, the glove hand with the ball in it, or you can do, a two-handed tag like that.
Brian, did you have another question on that? All right. I heard somebody talking, but I don't know who was talking. So we're going to go ahead and move on. Okay, good. All right. So, John, you're still going for interference and obstruction, right?
Oh, my goodness. This is the one that causes quite a bit of confusion. So we're going to spend a little bit of time on that. Before we go on, is there any other questions about what we have talked about? What I want to say is usually the staff guys will stay on for a little bit after the end to answer any more questions that you have. So we're happy to answer lots of questions. So put them in the chat, or you can even save them for later. Okay, let's talk about interference and obstruction. So before we go on with this is really a lot. There's a lot of confusion and misconceptions about what is interference, what is obstruction. A lot of people kind of blanket everything that that's interference, but there is 2 distinctions between that. As umpires and as managers and coaches, you should know that as well too, because we see that a lot of time where a manager and coach will come out and want interference when actually it is in fact obstruction. And we'll talk about the 2 distinctions and how they come into play in Little League Baseball. Okay, next slide. Okay, so the offense, there's a couple different concepts that if you can get straight in your head, then it'll make things a little bit clearer. So the offense has the right to the baseline on a thrown ball. Okay, so the offense has the right to the baseline on a thrown ball. That means the runner has a right to we'll talk about the definition of obstruction later. But anyway, so the offense, the batting team, has a right to the baseline on a thrown ball. Okay. The difference in that is the defense has the right to the baseline on a batted ball. So on a batted ball, the fielder is protected on that. The fielder that's going to field the ball is protected on that. So he has a right, the fielder has a right. So on a batted ball, the fielder has every right to get that ball. And if there are any runners around him, they do, yes, they have to either avoid him, or yes, sometimes we do consider that they do have to disappear. The standard is different on a thrown ball. Okay, and we'll talk about the differences in a little bit. But those are the two things you have to know. Offense has a right to the base on a thrown ball. Defense has a right to the ball on a batted ball.
John, I think I'm going to fix. I don't know why it just occurred to me just now, but this slide is a little misleading because it says the offense is right to the baseline. It's really the base path. It's really the offense has a right
Correct.
to run to the next base on
Yeah.
the path that they've chosen. And the defense,
Yeah,
it's not a baseline. The defense has the right to field a batted ball.
Yes. Yes. So this is an older slide, and yeah, I wouldn't mind that being cleaned up at all. So, but on a batted ball, the defense has a right to get that ball no matter what, and the base runners cannot interfere with the defense's right to that. Conversely, the offense has a right to the base, basically, a base path on a thrown ball, and the defense would be obstructing the runner's path, obstructing their I can't even think what I'm thinking of, but
We know what you're thinking.
we know what you're thinking, but anyway, they have a right to their objective. They'll obstruct with the objective of the runner trying to advance to their next base. So we'll talk about that later. So interference and obstruction, there's a few different things here. They're in different parts of the rule book. This is another thing that we talked about. There's rules that are in different parts of the rule book here. So sometimes you have to skip around, and sometimes you have to kind of look at two different rules to get a determination on the actual rule or penalties or anything like that. So there's offensive interference, and those rules are up there. You find them in the rule book there. And it's usually impeding a fielder attempting to make a play. Again, that's on a batted ball. The standards are different from a batted ball versus a thrown ball. Okay. Coach's interference, Rule 709, physically assisting the runner in leaving or returning to first or third base. This one, I think there's a slide about this one later, so I'm not going to talk about this one, about coach's interference. But that's, remember, physically assisting. A high five is not physical assistance. So we see that sometimes. A lot of you have probably heard stories about umpires declaring the runner out because of a high five, but that is not considered coach's interference. Defensive interference, preventing or hindering the batter from hitting a pitch. And that's that's almost always going to come from a catcher. There's also umpire interference. Believe it or not, there's only 2 times that you can have umpire interference. So those are the only times. So you'll see sometimes you think the umpires interfere, particularly when they get in the way of the runner. There's only 2 times you can have interference on a runner, and that's on the plate umpires hindering or impeding a catcher's throw on a stolen base attempt, or a batted ball touching an umpire in fair territory before passing a fielder. On the small diamond, for those of you who do majors and minors, you'll almost never see the second one of this because the umpires are playing behind the fielder. You'll only see that when the umpires are playing in front of the fielders, and that's generally a 50-70 and above on the big diamond as well. And then you can't have spectator interference as well, too. That's reaching onto the playing field or coming onto the field. So those are different types of interference as well. Next slide. So 605J, let's talk about runner's lane violation. This one is a little bit of a misunderstood rule as well, too. And part of the problem is that in our fields, for the stuff that we do, there's really not always a clearly defined runner's lane. There's supposed to be another chalk line there. And it's the halfway, the second distance between first and home plate. So it's basically on the small diamond, it's the 30-foot line, 30 feet to the bag, and on the big diamond, it's 45 feet. So a batter is out when running the last half of the distance from home base to first base. So this is, let me preface this. This is on a batted ball. Generally, a ball that's hit within the vicinity of home plate. So it's usually fielded by the catcher. It can sometimes be fielded by the third baseman or the first baseman, but generally speaking, runner's lane violation only comes into play from a throw originating around the front of home plate. You're not going to see runner's lane violation on a standard ground ball to the shortstop or second base or third baseman or something like that. So keep that in mind as well too. It's designed to protect the fielder throwing the ball and the first baseman receiving the ball as well too. So when that happens, the batter is required to run within that lane. We talk about within the lane with both feet within that lane on the last half going to first base as well too. So they can't be out of it. They can be on the line. On the line is considered within the lane, but they have to be within the chalk lines. Again, it's a little hard to tell on some of the fields that we work on, but generally speaking, you do have a foul line. So if they're to the left of the foul line there, then you have potential runner's lane violation. Okay.
John, I've got a video for this whenever you're ready. Just let me know.
Sure. Okay. Couple things. The ball must be thrown. You got to have a thrown ball. All right. In Little League Baseball, if the catcher doesn't throw the ball, too bad. And interference protects the fielder. So it's basically protecting the first baseman trying to receive the throws as well. Go ahead with that video, Dave.
Let's see if this works. I'm going to probably have to do my whole desktop for this. Reshare this.
This video shows a violation of Rule 6.05, paragraph J, or a runner's lane violation. Notice that the batter-runner has reached the point where the runner's lane begins. The batter-runner is clearly outside of the lane. The catcher's throw strikes the batter-runner. The umpire immediately calls time, rules the batter-runner out for interference.
Time! Time! That's interference! 30! You're out!
The ball is dead, and no other runners may advance.
So stop that share, and I'm going to come back to our slideshow.
Okay. So you saw by the video, I'll go back one, Dave.
Yeah,
Sorry.
it's okay.
So you saw by the video kind of an illustration there of what's happening. So basically on the small diamond, the first 30 feet, the fielder can be basically almost anywhere they want to be. But the second half of that, in that 30 feet, they have to get into the lane there. If they start outside of the lane, maybe they're 45, 50 feet down and they're outside the lane, they can't go into the lane and regain their protection there as well too. They have to be running the entirety of that 30 foot within the lane. You'll see it sometimes, but again, the important thing to remember is it's generally with batted balls in front of the plate. So you might have bunts can be if there's a bunted ball, that could be an indication there's a potential runner's lane violation. A little squib in front of the what we would call a swinging bunt, same thing as well too. So you're not going to get runner's lane violation on a ball hit to the second baseman in his normal fielding position. Okay. Next slide. Okay, interference by the runner. So 709E, it is interference by a batter or runner when any batters or runners who have just been retired hinders or impedes any following play being made on a runner. Such runner shall be declared out for the interference of a teammate. Okay, so you're going to see this on the front end of a double play sometimes. So on a legal slide, the runner must be able to reach the base with a hand or foot. Okay, they can't veer into the field or slide beyond the base. Let me clear that up. They can slide beyond the base, but they can't slide beyond the base and make contact with the fielder. Okay, so you'll generally see that when the shortstop is trying to maybe make that play on that, not necessarily the second baseman. But basically, they've got to slide legally. and they have to be able to reach the base with a hand or foot. All right. There is no requirement for the runner to slide. Okay, Little League Baseball does not have a must slide rule. Okay, we'll get into it. And I think there's another slide later that talks about this. It's a slide or an attempt to get around, but Little League does not have a must slide rule. Now, they don't have to slide. The runners are never required to slide, but they cannot interfere. Okay. So just remember that we see that from a lot of, and there have been players being called out by umpires saying that, oh, he didn't slide and he's required to slide. There is no must slide rule. All right. But if they do slide, they do have to do it legally as well, and they cannot interfere. So, and they can, even though they do slide, they still can be subject to interference. Okay. So in this case, before you go on, Dave, in this case, you can get the double play. We call that the 2-for-1. So you can get, so if he interferes with the throw, then by rule, you call the batter runner out as well too, and you get a double play on that one. Okay, next slide. So this is interference by a runner. We talked about this. It is interference by a batter or runner when the runner fails to avoid a fielder who is attempting to field a batted ball or intentionally interferes with a thrown ball. Okay, so let's talk about the first part of that. So it's interference by a batter or a runner if they interfere with a fielder who's attempting to field a batted ball. Again, on a batted ball, the fielder has the absolute right to that ball, and the fielder must, or excuse me, the runner must avoid them. Okay, that's on a batted ball. All right. So you can also have interference on a thrown ball, but the runner must intentionally interfere with the thrown ball. Okay. And the reason why it has to be intentional is because the fielders could just throw the ball at the runners willy-nilly and say, hey, he got in the way of the throw. So we look at that. Do we have a video for that one, Dave?
No.
Okay.
That's a
so
good one to
this
have a video
here,
for, though.
Yeah, this one here is, I think that's a Major League Baseball play from a couple years ago where I believe that's an the Angels, and he stuck his head out. I don't know if that's the exact play, but that wasn't intentional. He intentionally interfered with the thrown ball. Okay. So that's the distinction. On a batted ball, you know, the fielder has all the right to get it, and the runner or any runners basically have no protection at all. They must avoid them. Okay. Now, there can be interference without contact on a batted ball as well, too. There does not have to be contact. If you have contact, you have something, but sometimes you can interfere. You'll see that where a runner will kind of stand in front of the ball and maybe do a stutter step and then get out of the way at the last second. And the fielder misplays the ball. That can be considered interference as well too. So on interference on a batted ball, you can have contact, or you don't have to have contact as well too. Now, jumping over the ball, the fielder jumping over a batted ball, there's nothing in the rules that says that's an automatic out. Okay. Legally, a runner can run over the ball or jump over the ball. Again, what the fielder cannot do is interfere. So you have to decide, did that runner interfere with the fielder's attempt to field that batted ball? So you have to decide as an umpire. And then we talk about the point of emphasis down there. Sometimes you'll have two fielders converging on the ball. You'll see this a lot of times with maybe a bunt hit up the first base line where the pitcher and the first baseman is coming to field that ball. You as an umpire have to decide who is the protected fielder in your mind, who has the best chance or the best opportunity or should be making that play on the ball. Okay. Because in that situation there, you could have interference or you could have obstruction. We'll talk about obstruction a little bit, but in that case, you do have to decide. You can have multiple fielders converging on the ball, but only one of them gets protection to field that ball. So you have to decide that as well too. So that's what they're talking about on that. So anyway, that's another thing as an umpire, we get to decide. Okay, Dan, next slide. So coach's interference, this is what we're going to talk about, coach's interference. So is interference by a batter or runner when in the judgment of the umpire, the base coach at third base or first base by touching or holding or physically assisting the runner, returning or leaving third or first base. So basically, you're going to have physical assistance. Okay. So the coach is going to have to touch that runner somehow, either touch him, push him back to the bag, or push him maybe on a tag attempt or something like that. So you have to have physical assistance. So the coach has to help the runner, his runner, achieve his objective. Physically assist the runner achieving his objective to get to the next base or return to that base as well. Okay. So if you see contact, probably going to have some sort of assistance. Okay. Again, we talk about high five is not interference. That's not considered assistant, because remember, it's physical assistance, and he's trying to help his player achieve his objective of getting to the next base. On a home run, I mean, he's going to get home. This is where we see it, and kids have been called out for this on a high five on a home run, and that's just not the case, because even though that's physically touching, it's not physical assistance. He's already going to be awarded. When we talk about a home run is actually a 4-base award, because the ball is out of play and is dead. So it's a 4-base award. He's getting his base as well. But we do see it a lot, and it still happens. Unfortunately, it seems like it happens somewhere across the country every year. So
we do have a video for this one, by the way.
Okay. And then the other thing that I wanted to say on this play, it's not an immediate dead ball. So as an umpire, you keep the ball live. So you call the runner out immediately when you see it. That's coach's interference. You call him out. The ball continues to be live. Why does the ball stay live? Is because you don't want to deny the defense making a play on another runner. So that's why we leave that ball live. So we call that a delayed dead ball. The ball is going to become dead. So on interference, generally speaking, most interference that you'll see and call on a baseball field is an immediate dead ball. But there are times where we call it a delayed dead ball, and this is one of those times. Okay, let's see that video, Dave.
They're asking for time. So now he tapped his runner, he touched his runner and moved him towards the plate. And that's the reason the call was made by the third base umpire, George Rodriguez. Had he verbally just told him to go, it looked like play was live. And that would have been the tying run.
You're absolutely right, Niels. Time had not been called. You can see the umpire standing behind third base, waiting patiently for something like this to happen. And you see here the coach inciting him verbally. He doesn't get the message, and then you see the physical prompt. And that's exactly what cannot happen. There cannot be physical contact between any member of the coaching staff and a player while the ball is live, and a tough break for the kids from Cascade.
So incidentally, that would have been a game winner, and it ended up being a game loser.
Yep. Yeah. And that was I don't know how many years ago. That was just a few years ago at the Western Region Tournament up there in San Bernardino. And George Rodriguez, that's an interesting way to end the game. That's a gutsy call, but it's the right call. Again, what did the coach do? He physically assisted his runner, getting to his objective, and that is against the rules. That's a gutsy call. So I know George Rodriguez. I've instructed with him. I've upped a lot of games. He's up around the Corona area, District 72 up there. And interestingly enough, George Rodriguez, that same umpire, is going to the Little League World Series this year. So he got the call. So good for him. So anyway, that's a big time call right there. Okay. 709K. It's interference by a batter runner when a fair ball touches the batter or runner in fair territory before touching a fielder. So this is on a batted ball. You'll see this sometimes where a batted ball hits the runner, maybe R1 going to from first to second. So anytime the ball hits the runner before it passes a fielder, the ball is immediately dead. That runner's out. The batter runner is awarded first base, and all other runners return to their type of pitch, their last legally occupied base. Okay. One thing to know is the base is not a sanctuary. So if you're standing on third base and you get hit with a batted ball, you're out. It's not a sanctuary. So if it's a fair batted ball, there's distinction between a fair batted ball and a foul ball. Foul ball is nothing but a foul ball. But a fair batted ball, if you're standing on any one of the bases and you get hit, it's not a sanctuary, with the exception of an infield fly. But there are some considerations on the infield fly as well too. We won't get into that. But basically, if you get hit by a batted ball that has not passed a fielder, it's an out almost all the time. Now, when we talk about passing a fielder, it's the ball that's in the vicinity of the fielder. It goes through the legs of the fielder or to the right or the left of the fielder. So it's not a ball that's 10 feet away that passes a fielder that maybe hits the 5-5 hole or the 3-5 hole or something like that. So unless it passes in the immediate vicinity of a fielder, you're going to have that run, the runners declared out. Okay. Catcher's interference. All right, you'll see this sometimes. Generally speaking, that's catcher's interference. There's a few different ones. You can have it on a swing. You'll see it most of the time where the catcher gets a little too close to the batter, and on the swing, the bat hits the catcher's glove. Sometimes if you're really lucky, the glove comes flying off, then it's an obvious call. Other times it's a very subtle call, so it's hard to get. But that's basically what you see. So you can also have catcher interference on maybe a steal play where the catcher runs up and tries to grab the pitch and is coming across the plate to catch the pitch in order to catch a runner stealing or something like that. You can have catcher's interference as well too. So the batter becomes a runner and is entitled to first base when the catcher interferes with the batter. This is another one of those delayed dead balls. We're not going to call it immediately. You're just going to call out the interference and then see what happens, because sometimes you're going to actually, in this case, sometimes you can actually ignore the interference. So the runners return unless the runners were stealing the runners advance. The exception is if the batter, runner, and all runners advance one base safely, the results of the play are going to stand, and there's no manager's option. He doesn't get the play on that. So the manager, if not, the manager does have an option on that. Okay, so if the batter, runner, and all runners advance at least one base safely, then we ignore the interference and it's the result of the play. If that doesn't happen, if, say, the batter, runner is retired, or another runner is retired, or any of the runners do not advance one base safely, the manager actually has the option to take the results of the play. And sometimes that will happen where a run will score, but maybe your batter, runner gets thrown out at first. Well, you may want to trade that out for a run instead of having that runner go back to third. So this is one of those things, as a manager, you should know this, that you in certain situations you may have the option of taking the play. Okay. And again, the interference must be with the batter's attempt to hit the ball. So if it hits beforehand, they talk about, if he's taking warm-up swings or something like that, and that's nothing. That's not a penalty. And if he hits the glove during warm-up swing or something like that, it has to be a legitimate attempt to hit the ball. But again, it doesn't have to necessarily be a swing. If that catcher comes out in front of the play to catch that pitch and doesn't give the batter the opportunity to hit the ball, that can be catcher's interference as well. But again, this is one of those times where it's a delayed dead ball because we want to see what happens. And again, we may ignore it. Or the manager might want to take the results of the play. So we let the play play out, and then sometimes we've got to sort it out at the end. But if you're going to enforce the catcher's interference, the batter gets awarded first base, and all other runners advance if they're forced to advance or if they were advancing on a steal. Okay, next slide. Okay, umpire interference, we talked about this. Okay, so you're only going to have 2 times for an umpire interference. Okay, so if the plate umpire interferes with the catcher's act of throwing, so you usually see that on throw play. That has happened to me, where the catcher rears back and it hits me or hits my. In this case, for me, it happened once and it did hit the mask. So you have to call interference on yourself. So that's interference. And in 509B, you wait to see what happens. If the catcher's throw gets the runner out, then the out stands. Then the interference had no bearing on the play. But if the throw does not retire the runner, then you have to return the runner back based on umpire interference. Okay. The second one you'll see is if a batted ball hits, I don't know why it says touches a runner or an umpire. So we're talking about umpire interference here, but 509, if a fair ball touches an umpire on fair territory before it touches an infielder. Again, on the small diamond, you'll almost never see this because the fielders are all playing in front. So it's past the fielder already. If it hits you, it's just, that's nothing. It's a live ball and play on because umpires are considered part of the field. Okay. But on the big diamond, if you're playing in, and a ground ball hits you before a fielder has a chance to field it, then that's going to be an immediate dead ball, and you're going to award the batter runner first base, and all runners advance if they're forced to advance. So those are only the 2 times that you'll see that. Okay, runners interfere, or excuse me, umpire interference. So you'll see it sometime. There was, I think it was last year, there was a college play, was on, I saw it on YouTube. There's a college play where the umpire was late, the base umpire was late breaking in, and the runner ran into him. And you'll see this in major leagues sometimes as well too, where a runner will collide with an umpire. That is not interference. There's no provision for it in the rule book. So if a runner runs into the umpire, it's either shame on the umpire or shame on the runner, but there's no penalty for that. And I believe in this case in the college that he was knocked down. I think he was tagged out as well too. And so that out's going to stand, and you're going to have a conversation with the manager, but there's the only 2 times you can have umpire interference. You can also have a dead ball and a base award if a pitched ball lodges in the umpire or catcher's mask or inside the ball bags. That's happened before as well too. There's a couple good clips you can find where a couple major league umpires that they've actually had a lodged ball. I think one was in the armpit. I think that was Dan Bellino. And there's another one I think that's even gone into the ball bags, but that's on a pitched ball only. So if pitched ball gets in the umpire's or catcher's mask or paraphernalia, then it's basically a 1 base award. All right, next slide. It's not interference. Again, I would just want to clarify this is not interference when a fair ball, after having passed a fielder other than a pitcher, having been touched by a fielder, including the pitcher, shall touch an umpire runner in fair territory. So if the ball, if the batted ball gets deflected off of a fielder and hits an umpire or a runner, then it's not interference. It's just play on. There's nothing you can do about that. You can't fault the runner for getting hit by a deflected ball. It's only on a batted ball. Okay, next slide, Dave. Obstruction. Okay, so this is the other half of interference. So they go together. Interference or obstruction, they're 2 distinct things, and you need to know the difference between the two. Again, most people think that everything in baseball is interference, but it's not, it's obstruction. So generally, obstruction is the act of a fielder who, this is very critical, while not in possession of the ball, impedes the progress of any runner, okay? While not in possession of the ball, that's the most important thing. So when a fielder has the ball in his hand or glove, in possession of that ball, he can do almost anything he wants to. He can block the runner, he can block the base, he can lay down in front of the base if he wants to, if he has the ball. Now, you have to look at the definition of obstruction in the definition of terms, obstruction in 2.0. And that caveat on there, while not in possession of the ball, or excuse me, the definition of obstruction is while in possession of the ball. And Little League Baseball doesn't have, this is very important, this is a distinction from Major League Baseball, and a lot of people get confused on this. Obstruction, in order for it to be obstruction, you have to have, or for it not to be obstruction, you have to have possession of the ball. In Major League Baseball, they have the wording in their definition of obstruction as with possession of the ball or in the act of fielding, okay? Little League Baseball does not have in the act of fielding, all right? So in order for it not to be obstruction, you have to have possession of the ball. You can't be going after the ball. This is on a thrown ball, not a batted ball. There's a distinction. It's different. This is not a thrown ball. You have to be in possession of the ball to impede the progress of the runner. So you'll see that a lot of times where the throw is taking the fielder into the runner. You'll see it at first base where an errant throw will be taking the first baseman into the runner. You'll see it at home a lot as well too. We don't have in the act of fielding. So if he doesn't have the ball and he impedes the progress of the runner, that's considered obstruction. So that's the distinction. If you look at the two different rules, the wording is slightly different in Little League Baseball. Okay. Again, obstruction shall be called on a defensive player who blocks off a base, baseline, or home plate from a base runner while not in possession of the ball. Okay. So on a thrown ball, the runner has the right to the base path. On a batted ball, the fielder has a right to the ball. That's kind of cleaning that up right there, Dave, those last two things right there. So pay more attention to this slide than the original one. So so that's you have to understand the definition of obstruction, okay? There's no such thing as the fielder was doing what he was supposed to be doing and the runner was doing what he was supposed to be doing. There's no in the act of fielding in the definition of obstruction in Little League Baseball. Okay, next slide. So there's two types of obstruction in Little League Baseball. There's type A and there's type B. The awards and penalties are different, and one's a delayed dead ball and one's an immediate dead ball, okay? So you need to know the distinction on that. So type A obstruction occurs when a play is being made on a runner. So when a play is being made on a runner. So if there's obstruction, it's an immediate dead ball. So we're going to call time when we notice the obstruction. That's obstruction. We're going to call it out nice and loud. So it is always, in type A obstruction, it's always at least one base past the last legally occupied base. Okay, you're going to award the runner at least one base. Now you could award the runner more bases if you think that the obstruction was so egregious that he maybe was going to have a triple, but the fielder first baseman tripped him or something like that. So you can, but it's always at least one base, okay? And runners forced to advance by the base award do so without liability to be put out. If the batter runner is obstructed before first base, then they're awarded at least first base. Remember that it's their last legally occupied base. So if the obstruction happens before first base, they get first base. If the obstruction happens before second base, they're only getting second base. If it happens afterwards, then they're going to get that advanced base. So it's beyond their last legally occupied base. Generally speaking, on type A obstruction, you're only going to award one base, okay? And all other runners advance to the base they would have reached had there been no obstruction as well too. So so that's a distinction. It's a dead ball, it's an umpire, and you're going to award bases. That's type A obstruction. That differs from Major League Baseball. They call it type 1 now. They used to call it type A, now they call it type 1. So it's a little bit different in Little League Baseball. Okay, next slide. Okay, so type B obstruction is obstruction when a play is not being made on a runner, okay? So generally speaking, you will see this play on a base hit the batter runner rounds first base, and the first baseman is just kind of standing there, and there's some contact, or he kind of impedes the progress, or you'll see something there. Usually there's some contact there. The first baseman's in the way, or the first baseman is still standing on the bag. Even though the ball's in the outfield, then the runner kind of has to deviate a little bit or go around, the field. That's when you'll see that one. You'll see that one quite a bit. You'll also see, and you can see it at other bases as well too, but that's generally speaking, that's what you'll see. There's no play being made on the runner, but a fielder gets in the way of the runner. So in that situation, it's one of those delayed dead balls. So we're going to point and call that obstruction, but we're going to let the play continue. Okay. And then if no play is being made on the obstruction runner, the play shall proceed until no further action is possible. So what you're doing is you're calling out the obstruction. You're saying, I saw something, it could come into play. You let everyone know that there's something there, but you're going to let the play happen. Just going to let it play out. And then when all play is relaxed, you're going to call time, and you're going to impose such penalties, if any. Okay? If any. In your judgment, you're going to award bases or impose penalties that's going to nullify, in your judgment, the act of obstruction. Okay? So in this case, you may or may not award bases. So on a play, on a base hit that's just a standard base hit, maybe up the middle, center fielder fielded it cleanly, batter runner rounds first base, there's contact to the umpire, but there's no way that the batter runner was going to advance. You're still going to call the obstruction because you don't know what's going to happen, but you're not going to award that base. Why would you award that base on something like that when the runner was never advancing? So basically, type B obstruction is kind of, I'm going to cover myself and we're going to see what happens. Okay. And then I'm going to may or may not award bases. Remember, with type A obstruction, you're going to award at least one base, but a type B obstruction, it's really up to you. So if you're convinced that the value of the hit was a double, and that runner was going to make it to second base, but the first baseman got in his way, tripped him up or whatever, and he either had to retreat back to first base, or he's called out on a close play at second base, you're protecting him to second base. You're going to award him second base. So it's up to you to decide on the value of the hit, where you think the runner would have ended up, absent of any obstruction, and you're going to award bases accordingly. Okay. And it could be multiple bases as well, too. So it really is up to you. Sometimes what we see is a runner going back into the bag as well, too. So if runner's going back into the bag, you're going to award a base beyond his next legally occupied base. Sometimes you see this on a pickoff play. That's actually type A obstruction, but I just wanted to clarify that. Is he's going back to the bag, you're going to award the next base. If the fielder obstructs him, blocks off the bag. It's kind of like, going back to note 2 right there. So again, 2 different types, 706A, 706B. Penalties are different, awards are different. One's an immediate dead ball, one's a delayed dead ball. But there is a difference. So what I want to stress, there's a difference between obstruction and interference. And as an umpire, you need to know that for sure. And as a coach, you should know that as well, too. So when you go as a coach, when you go talk to the umpire, it's helpful if you know that you're talking about obstruction versus interference. Okay, next slide, Dave.
John, you're eliminating a lot of the questions with all of your
Excellent. Well,
different scenarios.
Let's get to them anyway.
All right, so let me go back to where we started. How do you judge whether a catcher is obstructing if they set up sort of straddling baseline between third and home awaiting a throw?
Okay, so we're talking about the catcher?
Yep.
Okay. How do you judge whether the catcher is obstructing instead of sort of straddling baseline between third and okay? So the catcher is allowed to set up anywhere they want to. Catcher can set up wherever they want to. Okay. What they can't do is obstruct the runner. All right. So you'll see this a lot of times by virtue of the catcher standing in front of home plate, maybe facing third base, right in there, right in the way of the runner. By virtue of them standing there is not in and of itself obstruction yet, or possibly not, because sometimes they can move out of the way. So you have to decide, did the catcher obstruct the runner from achieving his objective? Remember, doesn't have the ball, can't be in the process of fielding the ball. You have to decide. Beauty about the rule book, umpires get to decide. So that's your judgment. So he can set up there, and that again is not necessarily obstruction. It could come to obstruction as well too, but you have to decide. So it's not that he's not allowed to be there. He can be there if he wants to, but he may be liable for obstruction. So that's how that is. He can stand there, and if no runner gets in the way or they kind of go past him and there's nothing there, then there's really nothing to call if there's no play being made on the runner. And if the runner achieves its objective and there's nothing happening, but he can stand there if he wants to, but he could be liable to that. But when you see that as an umpire, that should kind of, raise a little bit of a red flag. Hey, could possibly have obstruction here.
So Jeff made a comment. I had a coach interference called in minors. The kid lost his balance and fell towards the third base coach who kept him from falling.
Yeah, unfortunately, that is coach's interference. Sorry. And what it is because, if that kid would have kept falling and fallen farther away from the bag, then maybe the defense could have made a play on him or something like that. So that's one of those unfortunate things where, yeah, that's going to be considered coach's interference as well too. So sorry.
All right. So Jeff says, if a runner remains on the base and the fielder runs into the runner while attempting to field the ball, the runner is ...
Yeah, again, that's not that, it's only specific in the rule book on an infield fly like that, where the base can be a sanctuary. So even on an infield fly, the runner still could be liable for interference, but there is a provision in the rule book on an infield fly. Unfortunately, on a batted ball, there's no provision for that. You got to move out of the way. Sorry. So that's just one of those unfortunate things in the rule book where you can be liable for interference on that particular play there because it's not a safe haven.
And Jeff made a comment. My son was victim of catcher's interference in 3 straight games in minors. And boy, I tell you, you'd think that after the catcher gets hit in the glove the first time that they would learn their lesson. But in minors, sometimes it takes a few times.
Yes, that is true. And a lot of that is coaching as well, too. As an umpire, if you're back there with something like that, you can, it's, called preventative umpire. I'm not really too much of a fan of telling a catcher where he's supposed to set up, but in minors, it's pretty much instructional. So as an umpire, I may tell him to move back a little bit, say, hey, hey, catch, move back a little bit. But yeah, sometimes they just, it's a learning process.
All right, Jeff, I'm going to skip your question since that was already answered. Brian asks, how wide will you typically allow a runner to round first to consider type B obstruction by first baseman?
Okay, so he as wide as he wants to go. I mean, again, that's your judgment, because runners are going to be taking a different path. Some are faster than others. Some take a better path. They start their the rounding first way before in foul territory there. So he can run it as long as he take it as wide as he wants to go. There's no restriction in the rule book that says that he can't. what the first baseman can't do is obstruct. So you have to decide, did the obstruction affect the fielder's objective to getting to the next base or doing what what you think he was going to do, either maybe a double or a triple or something like that. So it's really umpire judgment in that case. You have to decide, did the first baseman interfere? So again, that goes back to the value of the hit. If you think that was a double and maybe that kid thinks it's a triple, maybe he's thinking maybe I'm going to get to third. So he rounds that bag pretty wide because he's really on his horse and that first baseman is in the way. It doesn't matter how wide of a turn that he takes. Did the fielder obstruct him? I mean, you have to decide that. So there's nothing in the rule book that says, oh, I can only run in this arc or in this path or something like that. There's nothing like that. So
You will get some clever baseball players, even at youth ages, that will go out of their way to try to get an obstruction call for a cheap base. It surprises me when I see it that they're aware of the rules to that extent. So, you got to be able to know the difference between a runner who is just swinging wide and a runner who's swinging wide because his coach told him to run into the first baseman so that everyone sees that contact.
yeah, you have to be careful about that, so they don't buy obstruction. And interestingly enough, for those of you that maybe have your kids will play high school baseball, the high school obstruction rule is different. So it's not the same as Little League or professional baseball as well. So that comes into play as well too, because in high school it's basically type B obstruction all the time. But you have to award a base. Anytime you call obstruction in high school, you have to award a base. You have to be really careful about that. Them trying to buy an obstruction call as well. So if any of your kids will play high school baseball, it is a little bit different. And that goes back to what Dave says. You'll see it at the high school level because they know those kids are crafty. They'll try to get that extra base.
Speaking of high school, last year I got to give credit to John Peretta for allowing me to giving me the information in last year's rules clinic to be able to win an argument at our association. And that, so it unfolded in a training class at the beginning of the year. We had a veteran MLB umpire leading the training class, and of course he's used to MLB rules. And so, when I was saying that a fielder can't obstruct, even if they're in a legitimate attempt to field a thrown ball, they can't obstruct. And so we had this big debate in our association, and our trainer ended up calling Jerry Davis, of all people, famous MLB umpire, who said, yeah, absolutely. We wanted to remove that element of judgment from youth baseball umpires because they're just not in a position of an experience level that they're able to make those split-second decisions about, are they in a legitimate attempt to field that thrown ball. So credit to you, John, for helping me win that debate last year.
Glad I could help out.
All right, so we've got one more. Catcher straddling baseline a foot in front of home plate towards third base, even if the runner could have slid through their legs and tagged the plate prior to contact, but the catcher's position has caused the runner to slow down or interfere with a natural slide. What do you have?
Obstruction. Again, the catcher has to give, and it's different in different rule sets as well too. But in Little League baseball, you've got to give them a clear path, and you have to have the ball. So you can't be in the way. If you don't have the ball, you just can't be in the way. So in that case, the key words there are, it caused the runner to slow down or interfere with the natural slide. So they did obstruct the runner from his objective of getting to home plate. So just remember, they have to have the ball. So in order for the fielder not to obstruct, they have to be in possession of the ball. And in this case, he wasn't in possession of the ball. He caused the fielder to slow down or interfere with natural stride. So that's obstruction all day. all day, every day.
Ken made a comment, being forced to slide early will slow them down. Absolutely. I got a question for you, John. In a rundown situation, is it always going to be type A or B, even if the person obstructing, even if the fielder that's obstructing the runner doesn't have the ball and the ball is not on its way towards them yet?
So yes, in a rundown, it's always type A obstruction because a play is being made on the runner. Okay. So regardless of if he runs into the fielder that doesn't have the ball, the play is still being made on that person because of that runner by virtue of the other fielder. So there's an active play going on trying to get that. So in a rundown, you would not have type B obstruction. And you see that a lot. You do see the interference quite a bit on a rundown as well too. And it's a hard call to get as an umpire, especially if you're working solo. You can't, it's hard to see all that stuff because you're trying to keep the eye on your eye on the ball. So that's a tough call sometimes to make. But it would always be type A obstruction. You're going to kill it, and you're going to award the next base beyond their last legally occupied base.
All right, here's a trick play. You've got a rundown between first and second. R3 takes off for home when you call type A obstruction on a fielder in the rundown. So R3 has not made it to home, and you have called time. What do you do with R3?
So basically, what the award you're going to make, again, you go back to what you want to nullify the act of obstruction. Okay. And it can affect other runners as well, too. So in this case, generally speaking, we like to err on the side of who didn't make the mistake. Okay, you're always better to do that as opposed to penalizing for instance, the offense for what the defense did. So in this case, so you're talking about a guy that's maybe stuck in no man's land. He's between, you said he's between second and third.
First and second.
So first and second, and where's the obstruction?
And the obstruction occurs somewhere between first and second, but meanwhile, R3 is running home.
So R3 is running home. Probably inclined to in that case, generally speaking, the runner keeps running. So by the time you call it, he's probably close to home anyway. So I don't think I'm going to send the runner back to third in that particular case. I think we're going to score that run. Again, it's your judgment nullifying the act of obstruction. So it's really kind of a judgment call, but there's no rule that says, hey, you got to put him back on that base. You can if you want to. I mean, again, it's your judgment to nullify the act of obstruction. But in this case, we talk about sometimes it being the cleaner play is probably letting that run score.
All right.
Do you agree?
I do, but I'm conflicted because I'm calling time immediately. How can he score if I'm calling time?
Well, you would have to award. You'd have to say, yeah, he scores. You wouldn't have to.
That's one to look up for sure.
Yeah, generally speaking, that play, that play doesn't happen without, maybe a play at home because they're going to be most of the time they're going to be cognizant of R3, and there's a lot of variables in it. I see your point as well too, but I think I'm going to err on the side of punishing the defense for the mistake that they made.
So Ken says part of type A is to place other runners where you think they would have ended up. Yes. Okay, good.
Yeah, because again, it doesn't just affect obstruction. It doesn't just affect the runner that the obstruction was being made on. It affects all runners as well too. So yeah.
All right.
I agree.
So we are moving on, and this is my section, I believe, right?
I think so. I think you're coming up to slide 40. Here we go. Dave,
right.
Thank you very much. Take it away.
Thank you, John. All right. So two runners may not occupy the same base. So this is You would think that this should be rare, but maybe at lower levels when the runners are inexperienced and don't know what they're doing, you might see this an awful lot. And so a rule of thumb is if the lead runner is entitled to the base unless they are forced to advance and don't. So in this case here, where you have two runners on base, now I don't have a video clip of this, but the fielder got the ball and tagged both of them. That's the ideal scenario because one of them is out. You just need to determine which one. So if the lead runner was not forced to advance, then he's entitled to the base and the following runner would be out. If the lead runner was forced to advance and didn't, then the lead runner would be out. Now, sometimes you're going to have a fielder who thinks that they've got the right runner out and they only tag one of them. If they tag the wrong one, you're just going to stand there and look stupid, not making a call. Eventually, either a runner is going to retreat back to their original base or get tagged out. When you make the call, you got to point at the runner and make sure that the runner knows which runner is out. Because if you just call an out and don't point, the runner who was there safe may get confused, step off the bag, and you're responsible for that double play that shouldn't have happened. All right, so a ball that is out of play is the same kind of scenario as a ball that's lodged. There is no distinction between them. If a ball gets stuck in a chain link fence, if it gets stuck underneath the backstop padding, if it goes kind of under a gate and stops under the gate, then it's lodged. If it bounces back into the field, it is not lodged. And a rule that we follow in determining how to award bases is 1 from the rubber, 2 from the field, which is to say it's a 1 base award if it's from the pitcher, and it's a 2 base award if it's from the field. And the flip side of that is the award of bases is based on the time of pitch if the throw is a first play by an infielder. So first play by an infielder would be a 2 base award from the time of pitch. Second play by an infielder would be a 2 base award from a time of throw. And a first play by an outfielder would also be a 2 base award from the time of throw. Now, there's one kind of funky edge case where if all runners, including the batter runner, have advanced at least 1 base, when you have the first play by an infielder going out of play, then it shall be determined to be time of throw. And, if I say you'll never see this, it'll probably happen in your next game. At upper levels, intermediate and above, a pitcher stepping off the plate with their pivot foot becomes a fielder. And that award would be a 2 base award from the time of throw. And that will, anytime you call that, you're going to have to explain that. So be ready for it. We talked about this before, or John talked about this before. There is no must slide rule, right? So here is the language. Any runner is out when the runner does not slide or attempt to get around a fielder who has the ball and is waiting to make the tag. So you're going to see coaches will frequently say, but he didn't slide. He didn't slide. Well, he doesn't have to. And at this level, they can even jump over a fielder. At high school, that would not be true. But that is true in Little League still. For safety purposes, we do not allow head first slides in majors and below. But that doesn't mean that they have to slide head first when retreating to a base. So there's kind of an interesting scenario where you have a runner, let's say R1, round second, gets almost all the way to third before he realizes he's not going to make it. So he's like 3/4 of the way to third base, retreats back to second, dives head first back into second. That is a legal slide. it is kind of maybe an extreme exception. Most of the time, they're just, 5 to 6 feet off the bag and they're just leaping back to get their fingers back on the bag. But you do need to be aware of the difference here between advancing or retreating. So we talked about some of these rules in the first section. A runner appeal is not necessarily or not automatically a force play. No runner may return to touch a missed base after a following runner has scored. And when the ball is dead, no runner may return to touch a missed base after touching an advanced base. Now, you got to be aware of this potential fourth out situation. If the appeal play is a force play or a time play, it determines whether runs will score or whether you will have a third out and no runs will score. So an example of that would be batter runner misses first base on the way to second base, gets to second base safely. An appeal is made that the batter runner missed first base. The runs would come off the board if that was the third out. But if that batter runner missed second base on the way to third, and the appeal play was made that they missed second base, then you would determine the runs would score based on the time of what took place first, the run scoring or the missed base. I really don't like this slide. There is an awful lot. This is probably the biggest rule. Is this the biggest rule, John? It has like the most words in it. I'm sure of it. I might be wrong, but this is one of the most complicated sections in the rule book with a ton of like exceptions.
Yeah, there is, and it's often a misunderstood rule too. There's a lot of examples in the rule book as well. So it is. It's a long rule. I'm going to look it up in my fancy hardcover here.
You're going to measure the character count.
I am.
All
I
right. So
am
while
going
you're doing
to.
that, I'm not going to read this whole slide. And what I am going to do instead is talk about some of the fundamentals. So I'm going to ask you if you're looking at the slide, just stop. And you can do your research later. But I want to talk about some distinctions in this rule. One is there is a difference between a ball reaching the batter and crossing the plate. A batter that's backed up all the way to the back of the box, the ball may reach the plate, and if a runner takes off at that point, they would be leaving early because the ball must reach the batter. So the reverse is true of that as well. If the batter's all the way up in the box, then the runner can actually leave before that ball crosses the plate because the batter's all the way in front of the box. All right, so we have some different scenarios here. So the UIC, the umpire-in-chief of that game, determines the base value of a hit ball. So if a ball is hit to the outfield and a runner leaves early, and you determine that that was worth a double, then the runners must not advance beyond the base based on the value of the hit ball. All right, I'm going to talk about 713C. Bunts, hits a ball within the infield or advances on an uncaught third strike. No run shall be allowed to score. So we talked about this potential poof play where you have a ball that's hit into the infield, somebody left early, all runners advanced one base. No outs. You would not score the run in that scenario.
Yeah, and that's specific to Little League too. You won't find that in any other rule set as well.
Yeah,
So,
and again, this is small diamond rules. This doesn't apply to intermediate and up where leadoffs are allowed.
And I think, Dave, you touched on the distinction on this rule as well too. Again, when a pitcher is in contact with the pitcher's plate, in possession of the ball, and the catcher's in the catcher's box, ready to receive the ball, the runner cannot leave. And the distinction is when the ball reaches the batter. This is what we see a lot of times. People say, you can't leave until the catcher catches it. You can't leave until the ball crosses the plate. None of those things are true. The rule says when the ball reaches the batter. So it's a little bit subjective. So as an umpire, you have to decide, did that runner leave early? You know, when did he leave? Did he gain an advantage to get to the next base? So you have to decide. And again, specific to Little League and you know, majors and minors.
So the rule of thumb is that, generally speaking, the rule of thumb is back them up as far as you can go to their original base or the base granted by the base value judgment, right? And let's talk about a scenario that will illustrate that. I'm not going to go through all of the different scenarios that are in the rule book, but let's say base is loaded, batter hits a legitimate double. Instead of 3 runs scoring, R1 will go back to third, batter runner gets second. So instead of 3 runs scoring, you only have 2. Fair? And then, John, you had a trick question that you asked last year, and I think is great. So we're going to just put this out to the audience here to ruminate on this, and then we'll handle it in a Q&A. But the trick question is, base is loaded, batter hits a legitimate triple. The batter runner slides into a tag at third base for the second out. What do you have? So I'm going to just repeat it again. Base is loaded, batter hits a legitimate triple, but the batter runner...
Somebody leaves early.
Somebody leaves early. That's a given.
Yeah, somebody leaves early. Remember, one person leaving early affects all runners. So it can be any one of those runners left early.
And so we'll, you know, you can hold your thought. You can type it in chat. We'll handle it in Q&A. And then the last thing I'm going to say on this slide is that the mechanic that the umpires are taught to do when they see a runner leaving before the ball reaches the batter is to toss a red flag on the ground. Now, they won't wait until there is a play. The second they see a runner leaving early, even if there is no play, they're going to toss the red flag on the ground. They'll pick it up if there is no play and no base award, and they won't say anything. And so if for those of you coaches who are in the audience, if you see a red flag go on the field, that's your cue to talk to your runner, because they were seen leaving early once, and you don't want it to happen again when it might actually hurt you. All right, so courtesy runners. A local league may permit a courtesy runner for the catcher, pitcher of record when there are 2 outs. In my experience, every league has chosen this speed up rule. This is designed as a pace of play improvement to help your pitchers and catchers get ready while you have 2 outs. This is not designed as a substitution rule to put your fastest runner in place of your slow running catcher. So the rule in the book, as it's written, it always gets me. It says the courtesy runner may be in the team's batting order. It must be the player in the batting order who made the last out. And I just don't understand why that language, it doesn't make any sense to me. It's the player who was last out, not the player who made the last out. But there you have it. So the player who was last out must be your courtesy runner. And then one other caveat to this rule is catcher and or pitcher of record. So you can't say, hey, they're gonna be pitching next inning. Can I get a courtesy runner for them? Well, if they weren't the pitcher for this inning, then you cannot get a courtesy runner for them. And really, that's just designed so that the courtesy runner rule isn't abused. by allowing you to just insert somebody in as a pitcher or catcher just to get them off base so you could put somebody in faster. So managers, coaches are often thinking strategically, and so they must be pitcher and catcher of record. All right, this is kind of a short section, so we are going to Q&A right now. And Jeff, first question says, a base traveling 40 miles an hour travels 2 feet in 0.034 seconds. Are you really that good, Dave?
Yes, he is.
I am. Yeah, 100%. I'm assuming this is in reference to a runner leaving early. Obviously, it's a judgment call. And what I would say is don't make this your best call for you umpires. Like if it's really obvious that the runner left early and they're gaining an advantage, throw the flag. If it's so close that you have to like maybe think about looking back at instant replay to see if you've got that call right, probably not the best call to make. Brian says, if last out in a courtesy runner situation was pitcher and next to last out was catcher, can you go to out prior to that? Yes. So if I understand what you're saying is that you've got 2 outs, and the pitcher of record who's remaining in the game would be your next up based on the last out, then you would go to the next one prior to that. I don't know that that's explicitly written in the rules, but that seems to me to be the most common sense interpretation of that.
Yes. Yeah, 100%.
Okay. So now back to our trick question. Bases loader. Bases loaded. Batter hits a legitimate triple. One of the runners, doesn't matter who, left early. The batter runner slides into a tag at third base for a second out. I didn't see any answers in chat.
There wasn't any.
Okay.
You stumped him, Dave. Or they were all asleep. I'm not sure.
John, this was your trick play from last year. You want to take the answer to this one?
Yeah. So in that situation, the someone left early, the batter runner is thrown out at third base. You would think, everyone thinks a 3 runs scored, but you don't. You back everybody up. So you put all the runners back and no run score because all those bases are open. So again, one runner leaving early affects all runners.
And you would have, because you're so in tune as an umpire with what's going on, you would have recognized instantly that was the base value on that hit was 2 bases, not 3. Because the fact that they got thrown out just proves that you were right, that it was 2 bases. So if they had stopped at 2, different story.
Right. Then you would back up 1 runner and 2 runs would score.
All right. Richard asked, I just missed the courtesy runner slide. Question, in order for that to take effect, all batters have to bat once. I know it was like that last year. So you cannot remove somebody on base before their at-bat is complete. So when they hit and they are on base, their very first at-bat must complete. They must either get retired, the end of an inning, or advance to home. After they have completed 1 at-bat for mandatory play purposes, then you can use a courtesy runner for that player. I think I answered that question right.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
Yep, that is correct. So, and there's another one here, Dave. What happens if the coach sends in a pinch runner for the pitcher of record, but then in the next inning they switch that pitcher out? Well, if he got switched out while they were on offense, then the new guy becomes a pitcher of record. But if they were on if they were on defense and he got switched out, then the new pitcher would be on the pitcher record. But like Dave was saying earlier, if you can't project a substitution. So if they're on offense and the coach intends on changing him, he's still the pitcher of record until you make that change. And you can only make your defensive substitutions while you're on defense, not on offense. I think we have one more. That's it. No, that's it.
I think that is it. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Keep them coming. We have one more Q&A before we wrap tonight. This section is going to go pretty quick. This is the batter 1 foot in the box. This is a pace of play rule. This is another rule where I'm going to ask you not to read this entire slide, but to go do some research afterwards. Remember, this is about pace of play. So we're looking for a delay, regardless of the language that's in the rule book. And, John is saying, maybe look at that where I have it highlighted or delays, maybe look at that as and delays. So if the batter leaves the batter's box and delays play, then we may have a warning or a strike call. So I'll repeat that again. If they leave the batter's box and delays play, because if the batter leaves the batter's box and the pitcher and catcher are screwing around and they haven't delayed anything, it doesn't really make sense to penalize the batter for not doing anything that impacted pace of play. So, couple rules of thumb on this one. If the batter swings, if the ball is not caught, or the batter is forced out by a play, then they don't have to keep a foot in the box. So you see all these exceptions here, 1 through 8. Just kind of keep those in mind. If they swing, the catcher doesn't catch the ball, or they're forced out by a play, then they don't have to keep a foot in the box. But there's no substitution for reading and understanding the rules completely.
So Dave, one thing I want to say about that slide there is a lot of people think that they must have 1 foot in the box at all times. That is not the case. So there are 8 exceptions there. So sometimes you'll see that, and it even has been on the district tournament rules that they must keep it. That's not the case. So basically, they got to keep a foot in the box when there's a called strike or a called ball. That's it. So as Dave was saying, make sure you understand this rule, especially as an umpire.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where some of the nuance in the exceptions is important because, it may not be a called strike. It may be a caught strike but let's say it's a caught ball that is thrown so close to the batter that they're forced out of the box. Obviously, we're not going to require them to keep 1 foot in the box if they were trying to get out of the way of getting hit. So rules of thumb are designed to help you make some of those split-second decisions, but I think common sense will help you a lot in this scenario here. All right, 603, the batter's legal position shall be with both feet within the batter's box. This rule is talking about before a pitch is thrown. We're going to talk a little bit more about what happens if a foot is out of the box later during a pitch. But basically, a foot can be on the line, but must be within the line. So in number 2, just a little sliver of their foot outside of the batter's box in that example is not a legal position. Having any part of the foot outside of the batter's box in the first example is not a legal position. But number 3, with the toe on the line, is a legal position. There's no penalty for this. If you see it happen, just simply call time, make sure the batter knows that they must be within the batter's box before that pitch. All right. When you'll often hear about drop third strike, and really what this rule is an uncaught third strike. I'm going to read the exact language here. A batter is out when a third strike is not caught by the catcher, when first base is occupied before two are out. Now, a local league can elect to apply lower division rules, minor league T-ball rules for the Little League Majors division for the regular season, but I would highly encourage, and I don't think any leagues are not enforcing this in majors, because all of the midseason and postseason tournaments, district tournaments and all-stars will be enforcing this rule for majors. So when a batter becomes, I'm going to read some of this approved ruling here. When a batter becomes a runner on a third strike that is not caught and starts for the bench in their position, the batter may advance to first base at any time before entering the dugout or any other dead ball area. So you'll see this happen where they think that they're out and they head towards their dugout with their head down, and everyone is screaming at them to run. At some point before they reach the dugout, they can become aware that they can run and they can make a run for it. This is the only animation you're going to see in this slide deck. And we're trying to change this number one myth. The hands are not now and have never been part of the bat in Little League or any other baseball rule set at any level, all the way up to Major League Baseball. I'll say it again, the hands are not now and have never been part of the bat. And you will continue to hear this on the field every year, and for some reason, it just won't die. If the ball makes contact with the hands, it's an immediate dead ball. We're going to talk about some exceptions, but I want to show you some video examples.
1-2 to Prince, and that hit his hand.
Okay, let's say for the moment that did hit his hands, because there's a distinction between what would happen if it hit the bat at the same time, or the bat first and then the hands. And there's a distinction between, did he swing? Okay, I'm going to play a little bit more of this video.
Trying to shake that off. It might have hit the bat first. I think that's the ruling here.
Okay, now we see it slow motion. Did he go? You probably can't tell from this angle, but from that angle, it sure looked like he checked his swing. And the ball hit him in the knuckles before it hit the bat. This was at a Little League Northwest regional, I believe, and that batter, after some discussion, was determined to have been hit by the pitch and was awarded first base. This is one that I tried to play last year and it didn't work, and so my fingers are crossed.
He struggled lately against lefties. Now the 0-1. Hit him. Got him on the back foot, it appeared.
This one was a weird one.
Swing, yeah.
Hit him in the leg.
Brian Gorman indicated.
What do you think? Did he go?
Herrera wanted an appeal.
Oof.
It was close. Looked like he went and it hit him in the knee.
And that's what they determined. So in this case scenario, I'm not going to play the entire video. He did get, and he ended up getting tossed, and I think there may have been another ejection on this too, but they determined that he did in fact swing at that, and that was strike 3. And so the batter was out, regardless of the fact that it hit him.
He struggled late.
All right. A batter is out when a fair ball touches said batter before touching a fielder. I'm not going to go into this too much because we've already talked about it. Do not call interference until the batter has a... Oh, actually, no, this is a little bit different. This is the batter. That was the runner. So the starred note is don't call interference until the batter has a step and a half. This is kind of an interpretation. Step and a half to get out of the box. So if the ball hits the batter immediately, then they're not going to be out. for interference. So this is, the ball contacts the bat and then hits the batter. Now, if the ball contacts the bat, hits the ground, the batter runner is a step and a half outside the box when the ball contacts them a second time, then the batter runner would be out for interference. And G, after hitting or bunting a fair ball, the bat hits the ball a second time in fair territory. The ball is dead and no runners may advance. If the batter runner drops the bat and the ball rolls against the bat in fair territory, and there was no intention to interfere in your judgment, there was no intention to interfere with the course of the ball is alive and in play. And I think we talked about a funky situation with batter runner. During the swing through, the helmet comes off and deflects. So if the ball contacts the helmet in foul territory, then it is a foul ball. But if the ball contacts the helmet in fair territory and bounces foul, I think we said it was fair, but now I can't remember.
I don't remember either.
I mean, that is definitely a weird one. So the good news is nobody else will know the rule. So you just come up with whatever makes sense to you and everyone will probably just buy it. You have anything else on that one before we go to the next slide?
No, go ahead.
All right, approved ruling. If a bat is thrown into fair or foul territory and interferes with a defensive player attempting to make a play, interference should be called regardless of whether it was intentional. And, oh, this is what I was talking about. In cases where a detached batting helmet is accidentally hit in fair territory with a batted or thrown ball, the ball remains in play the same as if it has not hit his helmet. So we talked about the feet being in the box before the pitch. Now this is entirely outside of the batter's box during the pitch. So if one foot is entirely, one or both feet is entirely outside the batter's box at the time contact is made, then the batter is out for an illegally batted ball. If the foot is entirely out, but not on the ground, it is a legal hit. The batter is out regardless of whether that ball is hit fair or foul. And if you call this on a foul ball, if you call this a legally batted ball on a foul ball, you better be prepared to explain it. Do not make this your best call. I've had situations here where in my mind, I was 100% certain there was a foot out when the batter made contact with the ball, and on replay, or not replay, but, watching video taken on a GoPro at the end of the game, I realized that that foot was actually in until the last second. It just snapped out, and that's when I looked down. So get the obvious ones where the batter squares to bunt and is standing on home plate with one foot completely out, or a drag bunt where they're clearly outside of the box. Don't make that your best call. Oh, and then one last thing, and I know we're over time, but we're going to wrap up here real soon. In high school, any part of your foot touching home plate is an illegally batted ball in Little League, and in OBR, official baseball rules, that foot needs to be completely outside of the box. So just the act of having a toe on home plate is not grounds for an illegally batted ball. A batter is out for illegal action when interfering with the catcher's fielding or throwing by stepping out of the batter's box or making any movement that hinders the catcher's actions at home plate or their ability to make a play. So, trying to pick off R1 going to second, or failing to make a reasonable effort to vacate a congested area when there's a throw to home plate. Okay, there's a lot there, but here's what's really confusing, especially for these inexperienced young ball players. They can't get out, and they have to get out in different situations. And sometimes they're going to get it wrong. And You know, so they're thinking that they need to get out to avoid a runner coming in, but then they get in the way of the catcher who's trying to make a play, and so they're guilty of batter's interference. One important distinction here is that interference doesn't require contact, and the catcher does not need to make a throw for there to be interference. If you see interference, the batter stepped in front of him, and the catcher came up and just stopped his throw because he could not throw through the batter, then you've got interference. On an illegal bat, we talked about this in the beginning, so I don't think we need to cover this too much. Is there anything in Rule 606D, John, that we didn't already discuss?
Yeah, the only other thing is if he enters the box with that illegal bat, he's still liable for the penalty. He doesn't necessarily have to use it in the at bat. So if he steps inside that box with 1 or more feet inside the box and someone catches it, that still can be he can still be liable for the penalty of using a legal bat. So in other words, you don't have to actually hit the ball to use a legal bat.
Yeah.
So if you step in the box with one, someone notices it. If you do use one, and even after the play, so notice that there, or is discovered having used an illegal bat prior to the next player entering the batter's box. So it can be before you use it, when you used it, or after you used it.
And if there is another play that takes place before that objection is raised, then you proceed without any penalty. You just remove
Yes.
that illegal bat from the field to make sure it doesn't get used again.
Yeah.
There is also one thing here. In number 2, for the first violation, the offensive team will lose 1 eligible adult base coach for the duration of the game. That does not mean that they are ejected. They just can't coach bases. And like John said, the regular season rule is not nearly as strict as the tournament rule. There's not an automatic ejection for this during the regular season.
Yeah, in tournament rule, the player's ejected, the manager's ejected, and then obviously because the adult is ejected, you lose 1 adult base coach. So the penalty is really severe. So you want to make sure that you don't if you're going to be an all-star manager, don't have an illegal bat.
All right.